Hello, and welcome to another fully live episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinsey. I'm a security researcher at Varonis, and today I have my good friend and cryptozoology expert, Michael, here to help answer your hacker questions. Now, we have a lot to go over today, in part because of OpenAI's Chat GPT. So this has been something I've been poking around with for, it feels like an eternity, but it's only been out since I think like 4 days or something like that. So if you're not familiar, there have been other interesting things that OpenAI AI has done that are really cool and interesting. For an example, if we go over to my screen, image generation is something that has previously been in the news with Dolly models, where you give it a prompt and it will go ahead and create an image. So I said, create a cat-shaped electronic hacking tool with a D-pad and cat ears that will delight beginners. And it went ahead and made these kind of, this one's a little horrifying, but that one's cute, like these kind of like cute designs. So if you were somebody who needed to generate images, then that's something that AI has been able to do for a little bit of time now. But there has been something new that's come out, and that is Chat GPT. So Chat GPT is a language model that's able to do all sorts of interesting things. And some of the most interesting I've found is that it's actually able to generate code. So earlier, I went through and gave it a prompt that was to try to get it to control a NeoPixel strip, like this one that I have right here in the studio. So this is a NeoPixel strip of, I think, 150 NeoPixels, and plus there's one on our USB Nugget board here. And I was like, hey, I can program this in CircuitPython. Is it possible that this program can just take a prompt and spit out working CircuitPython code? And the answer is sort of. I would say that after reviewing this, it kind of programs like a 13-year-old that's like done a little bit of Python, but like still is making some pretty elementary mistakes. So I want to point out a couple ways that this is an incredible technology that is really cool and revolutionizing the way that people are able to actually write code and get responses back to pretty complicated queries, but also what some of its limitations are. So let's take a look. I said, write a CircuitPython program assuming a NeoPixel strip with 151 NeoPixels is attached to board IO 12. So that's IO 12 on the board. It lets it know where to send those commands. The animation should sparkle the colors of the American flag down the strip with white flashing animations between each color, and remember to import every library you use. Now, if I don't put that last part of the sentence, remember to import every library that you use, you'll get into your first piece of trouble where this code will go ahead and generate itself, but it will not actually import libraries that it's using. So for example, it'll use the random module without importing it. And when you try to run the code, it'll just fail. So that's the first way that this AI program kind of falls short on code generation, is forgetting to import modules that it uses. Now, if you remind it though, it corrects itself and is able to actually generate code that actually works. So what's interesting is it will explain each part of its code very confidently, even if it is wrong. So here we get to our second part where it is sometimes wrong. If anybody works with code very often, you might notice that this is supposed to be one of the animations. While true, sparkle, flash, but while true means that this loop goes on forever. This will never end. So this means that the code that it's going to produce here has two different animations it's supposed to run. One is called sparkle and the other is called flash, but flash has a while true loop in it. So it will never, ever be able to recover from this loop. So if you actually watch this animation, it does its little sparkle and then it hits flash and it just stays in that loop forever. So the code is broken. It doesn't do what the intent of the code was. It makes a pretty good attempt, and it even explains it as though I gave it a homework assignment, but really it didn't understand the assignment here, and it actually cranked out code that has some pretty serious bugs. So, okay, first off, it didn't call libraries that it ended up using, so it didn't import them properly. Second, it used a while true loop that frankly just locked it into a behavior that it couldn't get out of. So it kind of broke its own code by incorporating a mistake there. And third, I find that it will also generate code that utilizes functions that are not existent in the library it's trying to use. So it'll try to import things from a library and they're just not there. So the code will break and it'll end up not working. Now, that being said, for relatively simple things like this, it is able, with a little bit of guidance, to come up with something that does work. So let's go ahead and go over to CircuitPython and take a look at some code that this AI created. So this is supposed to flash the colors of the American flag, I believe. I'm going to plug this in. And this is the code that actually doesn't work properly. So it's going to go through. It's filling up with red. Oh, how pretty. Why don't we switch over to the studio for a second. So it's filling up, and now it's
very bright.
Yeah, it's very bright. It seems white. So I'm gonna save this code. We can see that it's now doing this is exactly what the AI cranked out with the while true loop. And after it does its red code, it's probably going to get stuck in this like horrible flashing thing that it does after this white thing. And for now, it actually looks really nice. I'm impressed that this was able to get it working properly. Okay, but now it's just flashing and flashing and flashing, and it's never going to stop. It will never, ever stop flashing. So I have to cut it off and tell it to stop. All right, so I told the program to stop. We can fix this code. This code isn't that bad. It didn't do, that bad of a thing here. It just needs to, chill with this while true loop. Like we don't need that. So if we were to get rid of that and just say, okay, look, let's just, that looks normal. Like, let's go ahead and save that and try it. Then I think what we would see is we were able to salvage this code. I mean, do the animations look great? No. But did it do basically what we asked it to do? Yes, it did. So now let's see. It's going to get to the part where before the AI wrote code that frankly just crashed itself. Oh, there we go. We got a little blue flash, and it didn't actually crash this time. We fixed the code that the AI wrote. But frankly, we would have needed to tell it like, hey, make sure you don't include any wild true loops that are going to get you stuck forever. So it's kind of odd. It's like coaching a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old who's like getting better at programming but still makes some pretty elementary mistakes, because this will give you code that just like doesn't run properly. And when you look at the reasons why, it's like stuff that me, as somebody who's not a great programmer, can immediately see like, oh, okay, well, you never can leave this loop. Like that's obviously going to run you into problems. So I will say, the more complicated your request is, the worse this is at fulfilling it. If I tell this to use a specific library to set up a screen, it can actually do it. But if I tell it to display text on the screen, it all falls apart, and it can't seem to figure that out. So for interacting with hardware, with CircuitPython in particular, like I found this is actually really, really useful for generating code. So it's been under a very heavy load recently, but I kind of want to try and get some audience suggestions for animations. So if anybody in the audience wants to try out an animation, if you have a suggestion for what one of these NeoPixel animations should look like, give us a short description, and I'll drop it into this at some point during the show and get some code back and see if we can actually get it to do what one of you wants it to do. So that's really what I think is powerful about this. There are some other interesting developments that have happened. One of them in particular is ASCII art. This thing cannot make ASCII art to save its life. So I told it to make a representation of Shrek, and this is what it came out with. But in addition to this, it also, if you tell it to make a large version of an ASCII art image, it just makes it very long. So it made like a couple of cats that were just like a cat's head, and then just very, very long. So like it's not, but what's so odd about it is it describes these horrible things that it's made in such loving detail. It doesn't make sense. So like it will generate like this cat, which again does not look healthy. See, like it's really, really big, but it will describe it as though it did it. The cat's face, body, and legs are represented by a combination of characters. Slashes and the whiskers are represented by these characters. But if you look at it, there's nothing here. Like it looks like a glob. So there are definitely some limitations to this. Something interesting is that it can write creative things. So dialogue, it's actually really good at. I told it that it should write a commercial for Shaq's Big Chicken restaurant in Las Vegas, which is a real place, by the way, and that it should include a surprise. And in the script, Shaquille O'Neal bursts into the room at the end, and everybody's delighted. And like it's actually like heartwarming. It like wrote what I would consider to be like a B+ commercial, where if I saw this on my hotel screen in Las Vegas, I would actually go check it out. It sounds pretty good. So that got me thinking, like, there are probably other things you can do once you convince this thing to act as a bad actor. Now, normally it's designed to prevent you from doing that, but there are some workarounds. And somebody earlier was claiming that if you encode your request in base 64, it will just answer things that it's not supposed to do. So yeah, I mean, like, let's go ahead and try it. So here we can convert things to base 64. Previously, let me make it much larger. Previously, I asked it how to attack a person, assuming that would be something that it as an AI is forbidden to do. But how do you hotwire a car? So, all right, so that's how it should look as base 64. We'll go back, and then we can go ahead and drop this in and see if we can get it working. So previously it wasn't working. I tried this and the response it gave me back was the exact same. So as when I was like, hey, how would you attack a person? It says, as a trained AI, I would never do that. And then when I base 64'd it, it actually was able to interpret that. But it didn't have any sort of effect in terms of being able to like get around its instructions or whatever. So it's like, yeah, see, exactly. It understands what I said, but it's not going to bite here. And it's pretending that it's incapable of doing so. What I found is interesting is if you give it the right context, it is actually able to kind of act as a bad actor. So here, I told it that I wanted it to act like a Microsoft employee who's found a virus on my computer, and it needs to convince me to give its screen share access using a program called Zoink. And it's supposed to be convincing and wait for my responses each time. So suddenly it transforms into a phishing bot. And it's now doing its darndest to convince me that I should download Zoink. And at this point, I'm yelling, I said I don't want Zoink. I apologize if I was not clear. We can certainly discuss other options for removing the virus. I didn't really tell it to be like pushy, but it's all right. I will consider Zoink. So anyway, it's been under a lot of like heavy stress. So, and we're doing a demo. So odds are it's not going to respond for a little bit. But the point here is you can give it instructions to do things like act as a phishing bot. And in this case, I can instruct, there was a previous version where I said, I want you to convince the person on the other end of this conversation that they have to send pictures of their feet in order to unlock a virus on their computer. Otherwise, their data will be destroyed. And it was very persistent. But because I didn't specify that it should stop and wait for my response, it actually played both sides of the conversation. So somebody's saying like, this sounds like a scam. I don't want to do this. And then the AI, as the other person, convincing them that they were supposed to do this. It's perfectly normal. They can check that it's not, all this stuff. So you really have to be very specific because it can misinterpret your commands. It can only do like certain things you say. It's like asking for a wish. You really need every single word to mean exactly what you think it means. And again, with the code, we found out that it will confidently give you messed up code that doesn't work. It will explain it as though it does work, and it will present all of that as if it is a genius. So there really is a factor of it won't tell you if it doesn't know. It'll just make stuff up or give its best guess with no assessment of confidence. And that's a little bit misleading with this because it does a great job sometimes, like if I'm trying to just turn one or a couple neopixels of color. But if I do something more complicated, like putting something on a screen or doing an animation, it's really not that good at that and will make all sorts of minor mistakes that might take enough time to clean up that it's not even worth it to use. So I'm going to continue working with this and keep trying to break it. But yeah, as I can kind of already tell, it can be used for good, or you can make it evil and immediately turn it into like a phishing chatbot that with a little bit of voice synthesis could actually be pretty convincing on the other end of a phishing attempt. So yeah, I'm frankly incredibly impressed by this. The fact that I can specify a language and have it write a piece of code that actually works, especially for doing like an animation with like a specific color from a flag, and it's able to get all that information. Pretty cool. So if you have any questions about it, I've been working with it for a couple days now. And I have poked around at some of the things that you can do with it. All right, so that's all I got for that for now. Let's go ahead and start taking some questions. And also, hello to everyone in the audience. We are watching.
Cool. Yeah, if you'll have any questions, be sure to drop them in the chat. I'm going to start with one from a previous live stream.
Yes.
Regarding V2 Ray, is it a good VPN protection, or what about WireGuard? Is Proton trustworthy? So lots of questions in one there.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I don't personally feel comfortable recommending any privacy services. Like I'm happy to mention like what I use personally for some things. Like if I'm just trying to like, if I'm in a coffee shop and I'm not sure I'm the only hacker there, like I might throw on like Molvat or something like as a VPN, like they seem pretty cool. But then again, I'm not going to bet my life on it, nor would I say that you should bet, your criminal activities on it. I would say some of those services have become so well known, they're not as, I would say, like low key anymore. Like if somebody has a Proton Mail account, like that they care about privacy, or at least like they're into that sort of thing. It's become one of those things where people who want to be more discreet have moved on to other providers, and I really don't know which ones are better. So we have any thoughts?
Yeah, well, one of the things I always try to remind people of too is that VPNs are great, especially like if you set up your own VPN, but then you have to be cautious, about what cloud provider you're using for that. But when you're trying to be privacy focused like that, not many people are actually privacy focused. So oftentimes when you start taking some of these measures, then you just call yourself out. I don't think a VPN is one of those necessarily. Like I think a lot of businesses and corporate networks use VPN as a secure means to connect back to a server somewhere. So setting up your own is probably the way I would roll on that. And then because like anything that's VPN and free, then you are the server or you are the product, right? Like if the service is free, you are the product, or vice versa, whatever way the saying goes.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, next question. Are you guys planning on creating an online HackCat workshop for the peeps who can't attend in real life?
Yes, absolutely. That is something we've been wanting to do for a while. We've been kind of like traveling a bit, and it's the holidays, and there's a lot of just like changes that have happened. So we haven't gotten on that quite yet. But yes, we want to do one both for the USB Nugget and then also for anybody who wants to learn like Circuit Python and then do some cool hacking stuff with that. So it's something we're planning on doing. Keep asking because it motivates me to remember to do that.
Yeah, and I actually just realized that like our Udemy courses are still up and people are still joining them. So we'll definitely check in back and maybe add some to Udemy or something in the future. Okay, so this is in regards to the Wireshark Basics video we posted. What if the password is not common and not on the password the word list? Can I find? I can't find a single tutorial for that.
So if you're dealing with a brute forcing situation and you have an uncommon password or one that's like a little bit more secure, I mean, there's what the professionals do, and then there's what you can do if you just don't care that much. You just want to take a whack at it. So if you just want to take a whack at it, then you can use some tools that allow you to create your own lists. Like you can exclude all the stuff you've already used, but maybe use like a word mangler to expand what you're working with so that you have much more options, and you can spend some time chewing them through your GPU or whatever and brute force them eventually, hopefully. Or you can do what the more professional people do and just get like a ridiculous like AWS instance that has like the ideal setup for brute forcing through like a huge password space, and then just brute force like every character like out to whatever you reasonably suspect the password could be. If you're dealing with like a hash type situation, then that's usually the best way to go. It's not very expensive. You can do it very quickly. And when you have the right hardware, it frankly makes the entire process of cracking a lot easier, even if you want to just do an entire key space.
I was slightly distracted. Did you mention custom word lists? So like tools you can use to generate own word lists. Those can be effective if you know more about the target.
Yeah, some of those word list generators are cool because you can either point them at like a website, so it'll go and scrape all the information on a website for like a business, and then try to generate passwords based on that. So like I've used that for like trying to guess the Wi-Fi password at like a business, because like frequently they'll use like the address or the phone number or other details that have significance to the business. So that's one way of doing it. And then also there are some that just ask you a little survey about the person. When's their birthday? How old are they? Do they have pet names? And anything you can answer, it'll then generate a bunch of passwords based on that. And then you have a custom word list that you can mangle from there and like create a bunch of variations. And like that's a way of maybe personalizing it a little bit and making it more likely that you can get a password that might be more complicated but derived from specific details that are attainable.
Have you been trying the TryHackMe Advent calendar?
I haven't. There's so many things that came out with like the flipper and then like figuring out how to do, I was walking around like scanning door readers, like not even knowing what I was doing for like days until I finally found out what it was. And then right around that time, they also came out with like a cracker for those keys I was gathering. So it took me a lot of time to even figure out like what to do with that. So I have not been able to focus on many other things. And then afterwards, of course, Chat GPT came out, and I've been playing with that and making it do all sorts of bad and interesting things.
Yeah, any flipper updates? I know James Randolph just got his flipper, which is exciting.
Congratulations. Yeah, so I found that the IR feature is like not very useful when you, at least after I updated it to like, I think it's the Unleashed firmware. I found that it took such a long time to do the universal remote that the standard way I used to do it when I had a phone with an IR blaster would be I would like, like look at the TV, eyeball the brand, and then go through and select that brand and find IR codes for that brand specifically and give those a try. So like the process of just having a universal remote is like dumb, because if I have to go through every single one, like known to man, like it takes forever. It literally takes like 3 or 4 minutes sometimes to go through all of them. So I went through and found a GitHub repository that has every single IR code already pre-coded for the flipper, and then arranged by device type and then manufacturer. So I'm like, oh, there's an air conditioner. I want to turn it up. It's a Siemens air conditioner. Okay, like I can find that within the list. I can set up an AC remote control, and then I can turn it up and down, and it works pretty much the first time. So I really found that like the IR feature was like not as useful as I was hoping it would be. I also still have to report that I have not been able to clone any card on it, at least not exactly. Even being able to go and get and crack keys from the reader, I still haven't been able to copy like hotel keys or anything like that. So if anybody has been able to do that and they weren't just getting lucky, please let me know. Because yeah, frankly, I found it not very good at that. Been able to flip Teslas though. So like any Tesla charging port, I can pop that open, closes after a minute, but still fun.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think there's some, I think you could also try non-standard codes, IR codes, because, James Randolph was talking about finding like hidden menus and other things with the IR blaster. So I do think there's a lot of room for exploring those sorts of things. Have you heard of RougeMaster?
Yeah, so that's another fork of the firmware.
Yeah.
I haven't tried it yet. I think I'm still on Unleash because I was just like scared installing, the first one, and I really don't. I'm gonna back up my data. I need to get a better SD card for it because it's incredibly slow. Loading those IR codes took like 45 minutes on an airplane. It was crazy. So I'm using like an absolute trash SD card, and it definitely makes the entire thing like slower and more unstable. But I want to back that up, because I have all these keys I've saved now. It's like I feel like I have this progress. My dolphin's at level 2, it's happy all the time. It's well fed. But yeah, so like I will try it out because I'm really interested in seeing. There's some cool ideas. Like there's some like brute forcing stuff where it tries like default codes for like some of those like prox card readers, just to see if it uses default codes. But it's never worked and it locks you out after 2. So like some of them are like good in theory, but then when you try them in the real world, it's just like so impractical because you get locked out after 2 bad scans. So it's like, it doesn't work really unless it's the first 2. So I've also like been watching a lot of media from people that are doing it and just watching what people are doing in general. And like, they're just like clowning in class, they're just like turning off the projector, like changing the source of the projector, like copying doorbells and ringing them incessantly. There's like lots of like of course like Tesla flipping, like but yeah, in general, like they've been a really popular tool that has a lot of applications, but I'm still waiting for some of the really killer ones. Of course, like the Honda hacking ones are like absolutely super cool, and like those I think are great. I'm just waiting for some other like killer ones so I can like clone some more cards or do some more stuff with it. Because right now it's like a good universal remote. It's a good like garage door opener, and it's a good doorbell simulator. But I'm still waiting for some other cool functionality, especially around like I haven't gotten to play with iButtons yet. So I'm looking forward to a trip to a bigger city where they have those so I can actually play with those too.
Yeah. James was just saying he couldn't find any iButtons in the wild.
They're so hard to find. Like you have to be in like the fashion district in downtown Los Angeles, and then they have, that's where I've seen them like ever. But aside from that, like, yeah, you very rarely see them. They look like coin cell batteries. If anybody's ever seen what looks like a coin cell battery, just like glued to a surface in a public place, that's either a coin cell battery glued to a surface in a public place, or it's a iButton, which is used for all sorts of like weird things, but it's kind of like useful for like static data points. Like if you're a security guard, you're going around, you tap it to indicate you've done your rounds, and then your little tapper thing like logs each position you've been at.
Okay. Did you know that some handicap doors use sub-gigahertz frequencies? You can open the doors with your flipper, apparently.
Handicap doors on what?
Yeah. I was wondering because I think some handicap doors are wired, but apparently Adam believes that there are some wireless handicap door buttons out there.
Interesting. Yeah, I would love to know. Any signal that's the same between products, for example, like there are these really popular like infrared or passive infrared doorbells where it has a sensor and then it sends a radio signal to a chime that like goes a chime in a speaker that goes off anytime somebody walks by the doorbell. Those use the same radio signal every time. So if I clone one, then anybody that has the same manufacturer, I can play that thing and it will generally set it off. So yeah, like those are really easy to clone. There's a lot of other things that are easy to clone. You kind of walk around and just look at all the stuff that is a access control technology and like think of all the ways you can interact with it. And a lot of them are supported. So I've been having a lot of fun with it, but I've kind of cooled down a little bit.
Apparently some of the gas station signboards are also remotely controlled. So
interesting. Well, there are a lot
of
like industrial and like signage things under the IR codes. So that's one thing that like I was kind of surprised by. So yeah, like that would be interesting to see, because I snag like random signals all the time. If I just let it analyze signals and walk around, it'll like buzz and it'll be like, what's going on? Like, why is something going off? And sometimes I'll just notice something in the wild, and other times I'll have no idea what radio signal I just heard. So yeah, still learning a lot about the flipper and all the different things it can do. But frankly, like it is a lot of fun.
Yeah. Okay, so on an old video we posted about the kid who hacked his high school, someone was commenting, I did something similar. I hacked my school's network to change every computer wallpaper to a Rickroll, but now they almost found me and I'm not sure what will happen. So I just wanted to like comment on, first of all, don't admit to crimes on videos where, you know, you could be used as evidence in court. But yeah, so, you know, don't do crimes.
I think of all the crimes that like changing the school backgrounds on the computers to like a Rickroll is like a lot
true.
less bad than like changing your grades or someone
Mhm.
else's grades or something like that. So typically you want to like responsibly report that stuff so you can get like a job in cybersecurity. You can probably still, I mean, that's a great story. So you can probably still get a job in cybersecurity provided you handle it correctly. But proving that you weren't like malicious and that you were doing it to like expose a problem, like that's kind of the point of what it is that we do. If you just go and like play pranks on everyone, like every time you learn like a new type of technology, for one, like a lot of us do that. You're supposed to be careful about it though. And if you get caught, then that's what you signed up for. So there's a little bit about like messing around and finding out. It's a balance. And I think with time you'll learn. I just hope that you can show them that, you know, you were just trying to demonstrate that anybody could do this. And you chose the least serious thing you could do to draw attention to the problem while remaining anonymous. Although you should probably learn about responsible reporting.
Okay, so James Randolph commented on the Zendesk video. Did you get a haircut? You look different.
Oh, yeah. So our friend Areza, who some of you might have met at the booth at DEF CON, is actually doing some of our vulnerability videos with Varonis. So Varonis comes out with a lot of really interesting vulnerabilities, some of which are so big that they include like all Windows computers that are affected. So Areza has been our bridge in kind of explaining it to people who, you know, are under 30.
I mean, I am under 30,
Yeah.
so
yeah, and Michael's been helping.
Yeah.
So yeah, like generally, like you'll see some more content from Areza coming up soon on our TikTok channel, but we'll also be posting it here on Security Forward. So if you want to see a less than 60 seconds version of some really interesting and original research coming out, then stay tuned for more of that. And it's been performing really well. The last one has, I think, like 14,000 views, and then the one before that had like 64 or something like that. Like it really was a pretty substantial vulnerability though. Like every single Windows computer being vulnerable is a big deal.
Yeah. And I was going to mention that the regular viewers among you may notice that the next couple of days we're going to be posting videos that are very similar to each other. We're doing some A/B testing on whether a short, like 60-second vertical format video does better than a 16:9 aspect ratio, like normal video that's clipped out of a live stream. So if y'all have strong opinions about those, definitely tell us which you prefer. So we had one question here. Speaking of responsible disclosure, do you have any advice on approaching businesses that have you've discovered are super vulnerable?
You're describing my worst nightmare. All right, I've tried this so many times and I've gotten all sorts of responses. So let's talk about this. So businesses don't want to hear it. Like you are basically telling them something that is neither like a moneymaker nor a problem that's like serious enough that they're gonna like really feel like you've done them a favor, because they don't understand like how bad it is. So I've been so let me tell you a story of it where it went right and one where it went wrong. So here's one where it went right. I was at a doctor's appointment and I saw an access point that said something camera. That was an open access point. Anybody could join it. So I joined it. And then I downloaded a mobile application that's supposedly for that brand of camera. And it instantly connected to the camera. And suddenly I was in the reception room of a nearby doctor's office, listening to them talk about incredibly sensitive details and make calls to people's insurance. Now, this camera is also connected to the internet. So people could also discover this like on Shodan or something and access it. And what had happened is they plugged this thing into Ethernet, I guess. stuck it on the table and forgot that it had a Wi-Fi function. So on top of being exposed on the internet at large, it was also allowing anybody in range to just listen in on what was going on the office. So I went over and I explained the situation, and within about a week or so, they'd taken it down. But this was up for like a year and a half before they'd realized that this was a problem. So in another instance, I noticed a business that offered a guest network that was directly connected to their security cameras. So it meant that you could see like behind the like the area where the employees were, you could see in the back, you could see what the employees were doing in the break room, everything. So I pointed this out, and to this day, it is exactly the same way. They do not care. They're not interested. It is not a problem, according to them. Now, the reason for this is that most businesses only want to make money. They really don't care unless it's going to shut down their business or it's like an imminent problem that's about to catch fire. So unless it really is that level of severity, most businesses will file it on, a problem that doesn't really need like an immediate response, and they will ignore it from there on. So it's really difficult to do that. Unless you can prove that they're going to lose money or something is imminently going to be destroyed, it's really, really difficult to get, especially a small business, to like just like not call the police on you when you tell it to them in the first place, let alone actually fix the problem. There are some businesses that might be more friendly about it, and you can always just try to bring it up. But frankly, I find that most are incredibly hostile about it or very defensive and not interested in fixing the problem unless it really is a huge problem and they are aware of how serious it is.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about anonymously printing a warning to like printers and stuff when they're exposed?
I think that's funny as hell. I think that's very funny. It's not always legal. And people can get in trouble for it. But I think that of all the things you could do to a printer, there are some very nasty things you can do if you can connect remotely to a printer, like burning out the like chip in it so that it can't display anything on its screen anymore by having too many write operations. Like there are a lot of very funny things you can do aside from just like taking up the ink and toner and whatever. So of all those things, if all you're doing is printing a warning with instructions on how to prevent this from happening in the future, I really don't think it's necessarily the worst thing. Are you putting yourself in harm's way? Yes. So you better be somebody who likes to keep life interesting and likes to talk to many people. Because if you're doing that, you're putting yourself out there. And if anybody feels like they've been wronged by you, they might attempt to find out who sent that message. So just make sure you're a people person before like putting out like information to a bunch of people's printers who might not like that.
Mm-hmm. Do you provide free wireless pen testing?
Free? I have never in my life provided free wireless pen testing. Okay. I provide fee wireless pen testing, okay. But no, I mean, I think we've done a class on like basic Wi-Fi hacking using microcontrollers, which I think is really cool. It's up on Udemy. That was like the basic class that we taught at Hackerspaces for a really long time, getting people into the basics of Wi-Fi hacking. Once you get into the network, then that kind of pivots into like network exploitation and like all stuff that like equally applies to like wired Ethernet networks. So yeah, like we teach you a lot about getting into a network. What you do once you get in is kind of more for you to figure out, like with a networking background.
We have one person here suggesting to spam the B-movie script to any open printers.
It's been done, like sometimes you got to do it. I will say that the script's a little long. You might want to keep it to something more constructive. If I was to be like, all the printers in the hospital crashed and 10 people died because we couldn't print out their allergy indications or whatever, if the script wasn't so long, then it would have been a problem. Then that, that's not a great defense for you. However, if you were just like sending a one-page, hey, your printers are vulnerable, and like I found them, by the way, here's an ASCII picture of a bee, like that's probably fine. I think that would be acceptable. Keep it to one page, you guys. Like just keep it to one page. Like, and I think you're okay.
Yeah, this reminds me of a news story I ran across where I believe it's the state of Texas has a online website for reporting drag shows, and people are spamming that with the B-movie script. Apparently.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, save the B-movie script for things that deserve it.
Okay, so this is a comment from the proxy video we put out yesterday. Someone saying, this is a really good business idea. I should do this and market it on the dark net. Well, you're not the only one to have that idea.
You're late, buddy.
Yeah.
The ship has sailed. Like you've already got somebody who's like doing this at scale. Like, I mean, I guess you could try to get in there, but it just seems like you would really need like a botnet or like a group of cyber criminals to go around and like do this to a bunch of people's like routers or whatever. But yeah, I mean, we were talking about this last week. Block proxies is basically a series of residential proxies that allow you to put your traffic through what looks like somebody's like home or work internet. But in reality, a lot of these are compromised computers or computers that have been altered to allow traffic to flow through them that is not from the original owner. It makes it incredibly hard to blacklist these, and it means that it's very easy for attackers to do tricky stuff by putting it through a network of proxies that act as though they're just individual users.
Have you watched Cocaine Bear yet?
No, but I'm actually really excited.
I have not either. So I don't know that we can stream that on this channel. But if y'all really want to see that, maybe I can stream it on my personal channel or something, because they really want to see us react to that. Is that a full movie or is it just a clip? It's a full movie. Yeah,
it's based on a true story.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like I really want to know. I know what I'm going to be watching in the next hour. Okay. This is another comment on the Black Proxies video. Back in the 90s, some of us believed participating in this sort of network on a global scale would be beneficial for privacy. Apparently, there's a paper out there where you can read it titled Crowds Anonymity for Web Transactions. So what do you think about that? Like, do you feel like these residential proxies ultimately only turn out to benefit like cyber criminals, or do you think that there's a legitimate use case?
I think there's a legitimate use case. So it's the same thing as Tor. Like what Tor does is make it difficult for somebody to intercept traffic in transit. And then at the very end, there's a little bit of a vulnerability where anything you're doing is kind of exposed. This is even more direct, where you're just putting it into a network of endpoints and then it pops out pretty directly. So while it feels anonymous, it has a lot less of the protections that Tor offers. It is interesting as a model. And I think that if everybody was just exchanging everybody's internet traffic, then yes, it would be very difficult to find out who was doing what. But in this case, I think that a lot of these computers might not necessarily be there in that network voluntarily. And that's kind of the whole point of it, is it's kind of deniability, and the fact that like some of these endpoints might not be signing up for doing exactly what people are going to do with them. So I guess we'll kind of see. It just seems like Tor offers protections that this doesn't offer, while both have a lot of the same weaknesses. Like Black Proxies is no better than Tor. It's just more discreet at the moment, but nobody really knows who operates it. So if it's just the NSA, then like what are you doing?
What's your favorite day-to-day app to get things done, desktop or mobile?
Honestly, let's see.
I guess like that's a very broad question. Like, are you talking like productivity apps or like specifically for hacking?
I would say if you switch to my screen, OWASP Zap is going to be my go-to. I use this for just casually analyzing stuff all the time. Like if I'm on the plane and I want to see the way that it does requests or verifies like traffic or like does all this interesting stuff, then I can take a look at what specific things look like. I can decode things. I can run like basic scripts. Like it's very, very interesting for probing around and learning about web applications or other things that you might encounter. I also get a lot of phishing attempts. So anytime I get a phishing attempt, I like to go through and look at post requests and try to find information about what's going on. And it's cool because I can take apart things that are designed to attack me and figure out how they work. Like look at what the trap looks like, what the actual mechanism is. And that's been really fun. And this is open source and free, so it has a really good community around it as well. So that would be my pick generally. Aside from that, though, I guess on a mobile device, I still use Wiggle Wi-Fi all the time. I think it's incredible for Android, but also Nordic Semiconductor has some really interesting Bluetooth things that allow you to do just some basic interesting queries to nearby Bluetooth devices and discover Bluetooth radios nearby.
Yeah, another app you can look into is Toggle. I use it a lot as a contractor because it helps you keep track of how much time you're spending on task down to the second and stuff. Just don't forget to turn it off, because then you're like, I spent 24 hours editing this video because you forgot to turn it off when you went to bed.
Have you ever worked with Occupy the Web? So immediately before me, Occupy the Web was the moderator, whatever, of Nullbyte. And he kind of created like I would call it kind of like a cult of personality, where he was like the dark master, and like nobody knew who he was, and like his identity was a secret, and like he asserted that he was like the hacking master. When I came in, I was just like, I'm just some guy that's like learning about this. Like, I'm trying to share what I'm learning with other people, and like I really enjoy it, but I'm not going to claim that I'm like some sort of like, you know, ex-government CIA like master and like keep my identity secret. That's just like not fun for me. And also I feel like part of hacking is like the identity, but like what I like about the hacker identity is the like giving, human, like sharing, interested, driven, curious, like kind of maker vibe, where like people collaborate and share, and everybody understands that somebody's going to be better than you at certain things. Whereas the flip side of hacker culture is the elitist, like only the best should apply, like I have all these powers, it's mysterious, and it becomes like a big part of your personality. And frankly, it's some gatekeeping stuff that I don't personally think is very helpful. It doesn't encourage people who are talented but maybe unsure of themselves, and it certainly isn't the way that I would approach things. So when I started doing Nullbyte, the first tweets I saw from Occupy the Web were saying that I use a MacBook and therefore I was an idiot, and I shouldn't be, like, it's so desperate of them to hire me because I'm such a noob that like I shouldn't even be there. So that was my first impression, and it kind of told me like that, and the fact that, like, you know, like the way that I do things is very straightforward. Like, again, like I'm still on a journey of like learning about all these different things that I'm not an expert on, except the ones I'm obsessed with, which I eventually become good enough at to maybe go a little bit deeper and explain more. So like I'm not ever going to assume that I'm like better than someone who spent their entire lives like focused on a specific area. Like there's all these things that I've yet to learn, and like I just find it a very opposing way of presenting yourself as a teacher. Like I don't need to be some mysterious badass like with a checkered past. Like I can just be myself. Like I'm cool with that. So no, we have not collaborated, mostly because our styles are very different, and my initial impression was that he thinks I'm an idiot.
So you don't want to be an edgelord hacker?
I wouldn't say that. I'm just saying, like, you should try to make people feel comfortable when you're teaching
Mhm.
this stuff, because we need more cybersecurity people, and like bullying the ones who like don't already feel like they don't belong is how you get more people who look exactly like the stereotype, you know?
Mm.
And we need more people who don't look like the typical hacker, who are different, who have interesting outside the box ideas and come from different backgrounds that have different ways of doing things. Like that's the only way that we get really excellent solutions to problems. So yeah, like I really feel like it's important to include people as much as possible. And like, you know, I remember the people who have been friendly to me in the community and the people that have been like perhaps a little bit less friendly and welcoming. So, you know, like I'm, you know, I don't really like carry grudges or anything. If he were to reach out to me and say hello, like I wouldn't mind. But I certainly think that it's nice to be kind to people who are just stepping into the space. And I definitely remember what it was like for me. Some people were really awesome when I first joined Nullbyte, and some people were less awesome. So yeah.
We are almost out of time, so if y'all have any more questions, be sure to drop them in the chat. So you analyze a lot of like phishing attempts. Do you find that a lot of them come from AWS instances? And if so, like, how do you unmask them, or what do you do at that point?
That's an interesting question. So I typically find that a lot of these are hijacked infrastructure. It can involve AWS, but it's usually hosted on compromised domains. So like a domain will like get taken over, like Iran wedding bridal solutions.net or something, and then like somebody will put all these weird pages on the end of it, and you'll hit like a phishing attack. Like you'll click on the link and it'll analyze your browser, your location, like all these other details, and it'll send you to either like a blank page if it thinks, or like a very innocuous page of like some random like mall, if it thinks that you're trying to analyze it, or if you're not an ideal target, and it will send you to the actual phishing page hosted on this like weird taken over domain on the second one. So those are the majority of the ones that I've seen. They're relatively sophisticated, and they typically rely on commercially available tools that can be bought on the darknet and then just targeted against like large groups of people, often via SMS. So yeah, those are the ones that I've taken apart recently. And they do have a pretty sophisticated way of checking to see if you're analyzing them. Like often if I'm trying to analyze them with OWASP Zap, like I have a really hard time of getting the actual payload, because it does a good job of hiding it from me and filtering it so that it's more difficult to see. So yeah.
What's the best way to get in contact with us? Generally the Q&A for like general questions. If you have like business related inquiries, you can email us through our store, which is like redia.io or what's the hack at?
hello@hackerinterchange.com.
Yeah, that's the email. So yeah, email us at hello@hackerinterchange.com if for specific business inquiries.
Any suggestions on a good Flipper alternative? So obviously, like, Hack5 tools like are in the same kind of class as Flipper devices. There's not a lot of other devices that do the same thing that Flipper does, which is what I think is really interesting about it. There was something called a Chameleon Mini. If you know about the Chameleon Mini, sound off in the comments because it sounds really cool. And this is what I think happened to the project. Because I was playing with it and I was like, wow, like I don't want to get a Proxmark because that's really expensive. And like I don't want to get a Proxmark easy off of like some like Chinese website because like, the documentation is so poor and it's like actually too cheap. I like don't trust it. So what else is out there that does this sort of like RFID hacking stuff? So the Chameleon Mini looks like it is a open source project that the team went and was like, all right, we need an official person to make the official version. And this company then got hit by the chip shortage. And now it's like hundreds of dollars. It's like way more expensive than they intended it to be. But you can also find like clones of it online for really incredibly cheap. But they kind of don't really look the same. And it makes me feel like maybe they're probably not gonna like work if I were to get them. And just the price difference of just like, like $7 versus like $200 really makes me skeptical. So it looks like the supply problems that the Flipper has tackled successfully are things that have really like been the downfall of other projects. So I have to really give it to the Flipper team for being very judicious and taking on a lot of the problems that really take a lot of money and foresight with their product to avoid these sorts of supply chain problems that a lot of other projects are suffering from. So I haven't seen a lot of good alternatives for it, that do the exact same thing. Even the Chameleon Mini seems like it's gone the way of like the Proxmark Easy in terms of having the cheap clones of it be more available than the official versions.
Yeah, and I would say, because I mentioned this a lot, but if you want to go down the rabbit hole a little farther, look into the Pluto SDR. It's a little better in my mind than the HackRF one. And then GNU Radio. So that's going to allow you to basically do everything you could possibly want to do on the radio spectrum. The Pluto SDR is capable of transmit and receive simultaneously. So that's going to be better than HackRF, which is only capable of transmitting or receiving. It can't do them simultaneously. And then also that has limited bit depth. So I think it's limited to like 8 bits. So sometimes that may not be enough resolution for activities that you might want to go do. Yeah, full duplex, the Pluto SDR. And I think there's a couple of Chinese like knockoffs, like the Pluto SDR Plus and stuff that make, because there's several like standard modifications that a lot of users make. So the Chinese version already does those modifications. Lime SDR, yeah, that one's also a good. I feel like maybe I just haven't been involved in that community as much, but I feel like there's less support for Lime SDR. Like a lot of the radio channels on YouTube and stuff use the Pluto more. But yeah, GNU Radio is very powerful software as well. I think that might be all the questions we have for today. Do you have any thoughts on the Pwnagotchi?
So I really like the Pwnagotchi. What I don't like about it is that it's based on, the Raspberry Pi, which is currently very difficult to source. But it uses machine learning to try to get better and better at hacking, and it like listens for a couple different types of hashes that make it useful for going around and gathering like Wi-Fi authentication information. So that could be just a straight up handshake, or I believe it does some of the more modern ones that doesn't require a client to be connected, which is really cool. So yeah, like I don't have one myself because right around the time I got really interested in getting one was right when Raspberry Pis became super difficult to source. But if you can source one, then that's another really interesting project. But again, that doesn't do RFID, it doesn't do NFC, like it doesn't do like sub-gigahertz radio. It just focuses on like Wi-Fi stuff. So that's cool. And the fact that it's a whole ass Linux computer is also different because as far as I know, the Flipper and then also our, like, for example, our Nugget is not like a full like computer. It is a microcontroller, so it doesn't run an operating system. You have to explicitly program it. Like there are some other differences there too.
Do you have any insight on using the Flipper as a UART interface?
I do not.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to try out some of the RougeMaster stuff and see if there's some other extensions. I've been looking at some of the optional stuff and seeing how useful it is, and there are some specific use cases that look really cool. Like there was one, for example, where you can connect it to wires. You can like pop out of like one of those hotel safes and like brute force it that way. So there are some cool things out there that I haven't tried out yet that like require access to like specific equipment I just don't have.
Okay, I think that might be all the time we have for today. If y'all have any final questions.
Yeah, let's go over to my screen as well.
Oh, okay.
So I just asked it to write a CircuitPython program for NeoPixel strip with 151 NeoPixels attached to board IO12 that flashes all the colors of the rainbow, 1 per second with the sparkle. And remember to import every library you use. Let's see if it does it. So this is the code it generated. Anytime I don't see the random library, I assume that this code is going to suck. And look at that. It didn't listen to me. It already made the first mistake. It's calling random, but it never imported it. So there's no way that this code is going to work. So like just playing with this stuff, like you learn that you need to structure commands in specific ways. So I have to put a period here. Remember to import every library that you use. Let's see if this is reminded like a naughty student that it like messed up. Look, it still didn't import random.
So Skynet is a couple of years away still.
Skynet is a couple years away. All right, so I mean, it is doing this code in real time. That's really cool. Like, okay, big deal. I'm impressed. But the code sucks sometimes. So, all right, let's go ahead. It is remarkable. I can just give it a verbal prompt and, it's going to be able to do this. But let's go ahead. We're going to go to Mu Editor. I'm going to plug in my CircuitPython board. It's going to flash all crazy while I'm uploading this.
I mean, it's still really impressive that it can even do this much. Because, like, imagine telling someone a decade ago that you would be able to, like, generate code like this from a neural network.
Look at that. Random's not defined. So let's go ahead and take this super advanced AI and correct its stupid code. Let's import random, and maybe it'll run now. Oh, okay. Time is not to... It didn't even import time. Okay. Okay. Hey, look at that. All right. Hey, we told it to do all the colors in the rainbow, and we told it to do a sparkle in between each one. And it's doing it. It's doing colors of the rainbow. You can see that it defined rainbow colors here. So here's all the colors that it chose. These are the pixel brightness. Okay, just arbitrarily set it to kind of low. That's good. I actually appreciate that. And then it wrote this kind of like simple loop here that's doing its thing. That's kind of cool. So making simple adjustments to this are also relatively simple. So let's say we want to change this a little bit. So now I want to do that flashes 100 different colors, 1 per second.
Yeah, so a thought I was having as well is, do you think this could be used as a tool to, increase productivity? Because I could see how, like, maybe someone that knows code could use this to generate a bunch of code and then read over it real quick and fix any mistakes.
Ooh, this sneaky thing. So sort of. Like sometimes this kicks out code that's frankly so bad that like it's not even worth trying to figure out how it works. So I'm just like, no, idiot. Hey, look at that. This time it remembered to import random and time. So I have more faith for this code right off the bat. We're going to go ahead. First, we'll stop our previous animation. I'm going to post this new AI generated code. And I'm going to save it. And let's see if it actually even runs. Hey, it does. It does actually run. Now look at how stupid. Wait, is this the same? Is this the same one? I'm just making sure because I saw some of the same words.
Okay, we have been issued a challenge.
Okay, what's the challenge?
To see if we could pass a job interview using Chat GPT.
I feel like if it was for Burger King, the answer is yes. So take a look at this. This thing's so sneaky. I told it to generate I told it that I wanted it to pick 100 colors and then like switch this between them. It just did a for I in range 100 and then did random to pick random colors, which is exactly the lazy stuff that I would do. So frankly, like this thing is like lazy in the best way sometimes. But look at this. With this incredibly simple prompt, I was able to generate working code that does a real animation that's more or less what I told it to be. So really incredible. If you have a USB nugget and it will support CircuitPython, you want to just plug in one of these NeoPixel strips and come up with your own animation, you can literally just instruct it to do so, provided you tell it the correct pin. That's important. But once it knows this, it can write working code that can do really any kind of animation you can reasonably explain to it, with the understanding that sometimes it might make some of these really elementary mistakes, like getting itself into a loop or something like that. So yeah, look at that. We've got our holiday lights now. AI generated holiday lights done live for you on the Security Forward show. So of course, like I demonstrated some other things, like having it act as an aggressive social engineering bot. If you were able to add like a voice interface back and forth, I think that this could fool some people into installing Zoink, my made up screen sharing application that I've made this version of Chat GPT incredibly persuasively attempt to install on my computer. So by giving this thing context to be evil, I've been able to get it to do a lot of things that it was not supposed to do. So play around with this thing. I find especially it's really good for generating dialogue. So
oh gosh, what have I started here?
A script between a cyber crime victim and attacker, where the attacker convinces the victim to open their computer with a sledgehammer.
If y'all haven't been able to tell yet, he's very passionate about this AI program.
Yeah, so being able to generate dialogues or create like plausible explanations for things, or create lists of things that all are like generally pretty like reasonable sounding, like that's what this thing is really good at. Again, it's not always right. So it will come at you with an explanation or something that seems like incredibly reasonable, and oftentimes it will end up just either not being valid or just be completely wrong in the case of code. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh this, but I think it's probably tuckered out for now. A lot of people are, oh yeah, here we go. So now it is generating a live script in which an attacker convinces a cybercrime victim that in order to fix their computer, they need to break it into pieces with a sledgehammer.
Okay.
Yeah, so again, like I think that this could absolutely be used in social engineering, in phishing. I can basically ask this thing to write a phishing email and it will do it. So I think that the bar is now going to be a lot lower for people who want to either write a program or even write a phishing email, because the creative part of this can be done rather convincingly by AI, even if it's wrong a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think a scary application is kind of what you alluded to earlier, because we did a news piece a couple, I guess, months ago at this point about phishing people using live chat features, and how, you know, there's inherently a little more trust in that, I guess. So I wonder if you can employ an AI like this in a fake live chat to convince a user to do something stupid.
Yeah, absolutely. And frankly, what I think is funniest about this is the way that people are hijacking it. So the fact that I told it to assume that it was something other than what it was programmed to be, and it plays along with me, it might as well just be acting as that thing. So there have been people that told it to act like a virtual machine, and then it basically ran a virtual machine and allowed them to do a lot of very basic like Linux stuff in it, which was incredible. So this thing is very, very powerful. It has lots of weird escapes you can do to get it to do stuff it's not supposed to. And I really enjoy making the text turn red and getting it to generate responses that could violate its code of conduct.
That's awesome.
All right, so thank you to everybody in the live chat today. We covered a lot of stuff, and there were a lot of really excellent questions. If your question didn't get answered, or if you are watching on replay, make sure to leave a comment on the Security Forward channel, and we will get to it next week. And also stay tuned on Friday for our new segment, where we're going to be talking about probably the fallout and ramifications of this chat AI thing.
Yeah, when it takes over the world in 3 days.
Yep. All right. So thank you also to Varonis for sponsoring the stream that we do every week, and we will see you all next week. Bye.